Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Alien vs. Predator Galaxy podcast. This is Aaron Percival, and you're listening to episode 65. And joining me today is a special guest. If you've been checking out the site and the socials lately, you should hopefully recognize his name because I've been bigging him up something chronic and bigging up his work really bad lately because I loved it that much. I'm joined by Alex White, the author of Alien: The Cold Forge.
Hey.
And thanks for joining, Alex. Appreciate you taking the time to chat. So before we do actually nerd out and start talking Alien, I was hoping you could just give us a little bit of background on yourself. Who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it?
Sure. So, obviously, Alex White. I've been writing novels seriously since 2006. You have how long I get anywhere. I got an agent with my 5th book. Sold it in 2015, and it came out in that also should tell you how long.
It's a hard field to break into, isn't it?
Oh, it's extremely difficult, and that's why it took so long, because you have to build up your network, and you have to befriend a bunch of authors, go to conference, become a regular.
It's not always about the talent, is it? No offense to you at this point, but it's not about, it's who you know as well.
Right, there are plenty of people who are super genius, but the problem is that either they're completely unknown, so it's like they're screaming into a static field, or they're really hard to work with, and being easy to work with is job number one. I actually have had, and I don't want to say exactly what happened here, but I've actually had reversals based on how good my customer service was.
Right.
And then not for Cold Forge. Cold Forge was always a go, but there were some that weren't, and then they became a go because I was so nice and easy to work with. So more about me. Let's see here. I live in Huntsville, Alabama, which colloquially referred to as Rocket City. It's actually where NASA, they dropped all those Nazi scientists after they. So it's weird because sometimes you'll go to buy a house and it'll have been owned by a Nazi. I guess that's more common in Europe, though.
I can't say that's ever been something I've really heard.
But yeah, so I worked in military defense for a good portion of time, which is part of what attracted Titan to me as an author. They were so ecstatic when I was like, yeah, I can actually write about those from firsthand knowledge.
Yeah.
What it's like to work on programs like that. Just put it on a space station, obviously, but
a little different.
Only a little.
That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I worked a lot on unmanned aerial stuff like that. So it was really you get stuck in a lot of labs working with a lot of the same kind of. And so I'm always worried that one of my old coworkers is going to read the Cold Forge and be like, he's talking about me. Because you'll notice that nobody's really nice in that book.
See, that's one of the things I loved about it, was that nobody was black or white, but they were all just shades of grey and completely human.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really care about the characters first. And I mean, I've always wanted to write in the Alien universe, but to me, the Xenomorphs are kind of like a tsunami. I can't write them as characters, they're a force. There's just something that's coming. And so I didn't want to play them up as characters. It was really funny because in the original issue of the cover, there were 5 backpipes on the alien. Some people call them smokestacks, some people call them gills. And you guys, AvPGalaxy, immediately everybody spotted it, and so did I, by the way. You debuted the cover. I was the last to see it. What I thought was funny was the number of people across the internet who very charitably said, yeah, well, maybe this one on the cover is a special alien. Maybe it's because the book is about genetic engineering. Maybe it's a genetically engineered alien. And I was so tickled because I was like, you guys are really trying to give me more credit than is due here.
It's all right. We know you guys don't actually have anything to do with the covers. It's fine.
Yeah, I know. That was the first time I saw the cover.
Funny.
Yep.
Sorry, did I interrupt you with that? The question?
Sorry, I ran out of stuff about myself. Oh, you know what? I'll just go ahead and say my debut novel, Every Mountain Made Low, came out in 2016. Southern United States dystopian ghost story, and it's similarly dark, which is nice because writing the Cold Forge is very as you said, none of the characters are really black and white, and Every Mountain Made Low is also like, it's not really brilliant, vibrant, commercial, explosion-based fiction. It's dark and subtle and small and dangerous. And then this June 26th, actually, I've got a book coming out, which is weird. Having books come out back to back is impossible. You know how that happened? Well, I'll take it.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
but on June 26th, A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe comes out, which is my like kind of more lighthearted space fantasy about a race car driver and a washed-up con artist. They uncover a galactic conspiracy and they have to solve it. So if you like Firefly, that kind of stuff, you'll love it.
It's a strange profession. Seems to be one of your things.
Yes. I love. You're absolutely right. I always wanted to write a book about somebody who designs action. I always thought that was kind of a weird, because it's a job. It's a job that somebody has, but like, what's that person like? That must be
just go on Twitter, follow NECA, and there you go.
right. Exactly. Hopefully, I could learn about the industry. But yeah.
That's cool. I think I'll actually pre-order that one after we're done.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. I hope you enjoy it. Unfortunately, I can't be like, yeah, you should promote it on AvPGalaxy, because like it doesn't really, this is the most promotion that would make any sense to anyone.
Yeah. Actually, before we get into it, warning to the listeners, there are going to be spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
So
great.
If you haven't already brought it, go buy it, The Cold Forge, that is. And if you haven't already read it, go read it and then come back.
This is the first interview that I've done that's had spoilers a lot. So this will be fun. We can really
this is why I don't like doing pre-release interviews.
Right. Now that makes sense.
Because everything's so veiled in what you can say.
Right.
So yeah, I always turn down the pre-release interview offers. It's like, I'll talk to him after.
It's true, and like there are only so many times that I can answer the question, "How did you get this gig?"
Mm-hmm.
Which if you want an answer to that, you can check Set the Tape. You can check sci-fi.com. Like there are all kinds of other places that you can get those answers. I've done a lot of interviews, but because they're not spoiler interviews, you can't dig in.
Well, spoiler alert, I'm going to ask him about that anyway, but hopefully...
Oh, no! I'll say it here, too.
Yeah. All for completion's sake, you don't want to send them elsewhere.
That's right. That's true.
Stop diverting my listeners away. Of course, so that's Alex. I think I've given a pretty good intro for the book there as well, endorsement. And so let's start talking aliens.
Sure.
I guess this one's a bit of a bog standard question as well in terms of for an alien thing, because it's actually a little tradition that we have on our podcast and our interviews.
All right.
And we pretty much just love to hear about the first time the guest that we've got on has experienced the franchise. So whether that's Alien, whether that's Predator, we're going to be talking about whatever. So do you remember the first time you ever saw an alien film, and which would you say is your favorite?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, we weren't really allowed to have action movies and stuff in the house. It was just like no horror, especially. But Terminator 2 came out, and it was like winning Oscar, And so my parents were like, "Well, I guess you could maybe watch it." And so we watched it with a couple of family friends. One of them was an ex-Marine sniper.
Okay.
And so this dude loved actions, and especially horrific action. And so after we get done, my parents look at me and they're like, "Oh, he doesn't look traumatized." And so our family friend Greg was like, "I'm gonna give him all the movies." And
so how old were you at that point? Sorry.
Oh, I was probably like 10 or 11, maybe.
It's funny because I watched T2 when I was probably about 10 as well, and it actually gave me some issues that night.
Oh,
nightmares.
I loved it, but the atomic bomb scene I'll never forget.
Yes.
So I'm 36, so should be around the same age. But
no, I'm a little bit younger than you.
Oh, okay. Well, you just
Woo.
All right. Well, there you go.
It's all right. I feel old all the time anyway, so I appreciate any chance to feel younger.
There you go. Yeah, at my expense, no less. So, so he gave me on VHS. He had Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and then he also had Predator, Predator 2, and Warlock.
Okay.
And so I started just binge watching those. And I remember the first time I saw Alien, it was terrifying. But I also didn't necessarily get all the subtext, because that's a really subtle move for a 10-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't get it. I got Alien instantly. I mean, that's the kind of movie you show a 10-year-old kid. Because I mean, it's got that kind of 10-year-old's understanding of corporate dystopia, like Carter Burke's a jerk, and he's showing up in person to sabotage his own chances of survival. I'm really not sure what his motivations are other than dick.
That's one way to describe him.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was actually, and that's a big part of why the Cold Forge looks like it does, by the way, is Carter Burke. So yeah, I love Aliens, and even Alien 3 I thought was really good. And I still love Alien. It's still a real soft spot because, I think David Fincher's a genius. And I'm really sad that he kind of showed up as a new director to a half-written project. Like, I want to know what David Fincher would have done now, But, when you don't have any clout, that's what you get. But long story short, my favorite film, Alien, just the original.
Okay, can't argue with that.
No. It's such a safe answer, too. I always feel bad. I'm like, I know I should, push the envelope, but no, Alien.
No, it's fair enough. I mean, the great thing about those is how different they all are anyway.
Oh, I know. When I was doing my pitch session, that was, because I was, desperate to kind of, get the editor to like me and to like the pitches. And so what I was going to do is I was going to make sure that I tailored the pitches his preference, so I really played, because I had pre-written all of these on index cards and flashcard memorized 2 versions of pitches, and there was an Alien version of each of the pitches and an Aliens version pitches.
Right. How would they have differed?
Well, in the Cold Forge, for example, if he'd have said Aliens was his favorite movie, then there would have been a Colonial Marine.
Okay.
And there would have been a whole lot more, they would have spent more of the movie or the book together. Whereas with Alien, and basically his answer was, well, they're both so good. I mean, who can choose? And I was like, oh, you motherfucker. All right, well, I'm picking my favorite. We're going to do Alien.
Fair enough. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's one way to go about it. I don't even really remember all 3 of the other pitches. One that was around a military academy, and it was kind of like a Lord of the Flies survival horror. Their entire world was overrun, and these kids at their academy who were all runaway problem children.
Okay.
And the editor was like, "Oh, that's gonna be too YA, young adult," and I was like, "Not the way I'm gonna write it. We're gonna be really sad for these children. It's gonna be fucked up." But he didn't go for that one.
I'm not complaining with what we got.
Oh no, Cold Forge was far and away my favorite of the pitches, which is why I pitched it in the middle. You start with the one that's second best, you pitch your favorite in the middle, and then you pitch your worst last, so that they walk it back. That way it makes people feel more they go, oh, well, I really liked that other one, so I want to kind of push you back towards that one. And in pushing back towards you, they kind of buy in. That's a realty technique, by the way.
Are you sure you're not, there's not a bit of Sudler in you?
Oh, there absolutely is. Yeah, how do you think I wrote him? I mean, but I'm nice. I want everybody to get along. But I am, my day job, I am a director as well. I have a large team, and I show up and I help with projects. Luckily, I don't shut them down and fire people. That sounds
I feel like we're getting some of the day job frustrations leaking into the book here.
Oh, absolutely you are. Are you kidding? I don't write okay, here's the other thing. I don't write anything. I never make anything up whole cloth.
But what's the saying? Write what you know.
Right, exactly. And it's funny because when you say that, people are always like, well, how am I supposed to write a space opera then? But so for example, the Cold Forge, and I imagine you probably have a question about this later, so I can hang on to
it. I'm sacking them off as we go through them. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
The Cold Forge. So the week that I found out that I got this pitch meeting, I was at UX Week, User Experience Week in San Francisco, and I was like, I still didn't really know what I was going to pitch. I mean, nothing was coming together, and it's because it's hard to tell a story in Aliens that hasn't been told, and even on its face, mine resembles 4 other books.
That was one of the other things I loved about it. I think I said it in the review as well. If you break the Cold Forge down into its basic plot element, it sounds like several of the other stories that have come and gone.
I know, and people are really rude about pointing that out. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean it's true. It's absolutely true. And like one of the things that I kind of try to give myself a little freedom to say, like, don't worry about whether or not you're going to do something wholly new. Just worry about doing something right.
Even saying that, and I didn't mean it as any sort of offense,
No, no, I
which
didn't
obviously
take.
but
Yeah.
while they may be existing story beats and elements that we've read before, you pretty much just turn them round. The mad scientist isn't the antagonist of the story.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, absolutely. And so the idea came from, so I'm sitting in the audience and like I'm supposed to be taking notes, but like I'm just not there. I'm thinking about Alien, and then Double Robotics comes up to do their pitch or to do their talk to the group, and a telepresence robot comes out on stage, and it's basically an iPad on a Segway.
Anybody who's seen Big Bang Theory might recognize that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't actually seen that, but we have a couple of them that we use from time to time in my work, and I started. It wasn't that was the first time I'd ever really seen one in person, and I was like, man, imagine that you're a bunch of survivors, and then somebody comes to you in this telepresence robot, and they're like, we need to do X, Y, and Z to survive. You would be like, fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was like, we need to do X, Y, and Z so you can rescue me and we can all survive, you would be like, definitely fuck off. And so I was really just kind of enamored at the idea that there would be somebody kind of stranded, and they weren't necessarily in the direct line of fire, but they were like totally screwed if they couldn't convince the survivors to come help them. And then and around that same time, my friend's father passed away from ALS, pretty much a lethal disease, and I I'd been around for a bunch of that, and I have another friend who has a terminally ill child. Was turning into kind of a nil per os, and so it really started to click. Let's have somebody who's terminally ill, and then and also people who have terminal illnesses, they get there's a lot of discrimination against them. There's a lot of treating them like their lives are worth less because you can't save. And so when you're doing the calculus of like, how much risk do we take to save the terminally ill person, anybody's going to say, well, they've only got, why should we risk the 100 years combined of our lives to save 6 months of somebody else's? And that's, morally speaking, that's kind of a reprehensible choice to make. But because that's not correct philosophy. You can't just pay for things, good and bad.
Yeah. Very cold look at it, but it would happen, wouldn't it? Probably.
Oh, it will absolutely happen. I know people who stopped being friends with these poor this poor family because they couldn't stand to see the sadness all the time.
Oh, that's cold.
Yeah, it is. People are actually pretty mean, as it turns out.
I'm aware of that one myself.
Yeah, and then that was kind of half of it. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, you can't just do that. I mean, how am I supposed to write an entire book where this person sits in an office or sits in a bedroom or sits, like that's not going to work. And so I was still thinking, and then it's UX Week is in Silicon Valley, and I ended up riding to the from the airport, in with a venture capitalist, kind of a nomad, and the guy was just the worst. He was the absolute worst, and he was so charming, and he was a really good-looking dude, but everything that he said sucked. You had to evaluate it just a little deeper, and and so I started to think, because I do have a number of tactics that I do use to kind of move things around as I need, because I mean that's how office politics works. You don't go in there and you tell everybody your true opinion of, right?
I think that's true of everything, really,
right.
Isn't it? It's a basic human trait, I guess.
Right, exactly. So just turn it up a little bit, and you've got a sociopath. And I'd been out to a lot of drinks after the conference with a lot of different people from a lot of different Silicon Valley companies, and they never discussed the ethics of anything they only ever discussed the profit or the kind of ability to hit IPO. And that's really bothersome to me, because I also work in tech, and one of the rules I have for my design team is don't pitch me anything you wouldn't want used on you.
Okay.
And so But design ethics, see, that's the major difference between me and Dorian. Ethics don't ever come into it for some of these people, and some people just, like Dorian especially is one of those people who's just like this venture capitalist. It's not enough to win; it's important that somebody loses.
A bit more sadistic element to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a game unless somebody loses, and that's and if you look at it, that's why he carries off every single interaction towards, because he could have been like, okay, whatever, she didn't like me, who cares? But
He has to make them pay for
right, exactly.
him. Yeah.
Right, and but it has to happen organically, because if it looks like revenge, then he comes off as petty, and that's that's losing. So he has to like save it up, figure things out, manipulate people into the correct positions, and then screw them over.
Which he did plenty of.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. This next one, I'm kind of hoping you're going to be a big enough fan to do this one. It's one I'm going to hopefully incorporate into, how you have your stock questions and stuff like that on these things.
Sure.
It's one I was sort of hoping to be able to incorporate in because it's a little bit of a thing in our community.
Okay.
And it's one of the big arguments in quotation marks here is in regards to the skull in Giger's original alien design.
Do I like it with or without eyes?
Yes. Are you pro skull or not?
I don't know, because it wasn't in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of, like, in design, I can look at that and I can say, like, I really enjoy that. But I mean, the fact that it doesn't have eyes is creepy, if you don't know what its eyes are.
But then again, they are just empty eye sockets.
Right, I know. Yeah, I don't know. Certainly from a canonical perspective, the fact that pretty much the engineers seeded everything, as far as I can tell, that's pro skull. There should probably be some form of skull in there. It's a tough one. That is a super tough question. I think I'm still anti-skull, because I feel like, I feel like in motion it might have been distracting, and I have a concern with humanizing the alien much. I don't want to identify with it, even if it's a bunch of empty eye sockets. But that would be sweet. I just really need to see it in motion. That's the problem. I need to see it in the lighting on the screen, because it could be great or it could be terrible. I bet that baby alien could have been lit pretty well too. But the
baby alien
from
yes,
Resurrection.
You know what? I like the concept of the newborn. I hate the design. I thought for a long time that if they'd have just done something like the original Alien without the cowl on it and just that empty skull on the front, that would have been a far superior approach to
oh, no doubt,
the newborn, and to show the human traits without it looking so.
Yeah, it looked kind of boring. I don't know. It was like just kind of slimy. Yes, mammalian really neat.
Okay, so
I think I'm anti-skull unless I can see it in motion. That's the important part.
I've just lost ground in this argument then.
Oh no.
Nah, it's fine.
Then I can be pro-skull. It's fine. I actually I love Giger's work. I have all of his art books. I never actually thought that I'd get to write an alien novel when I was buying them back as a kid. But yeah, I'm sure that would have been disturbing. It just also would have made it huge, which good, bad.
Okay, well, I'm not going to manipulate you anymore on that answer.
Yeah, man, you yeah.
Okay. Now, while not quite as extensive as the likes of Star Wars or say Star Trek, the expanded universe for Alien has pretty much been, a long time a source of additional lore for the franchise since the 80s.
Oh yeah.
When Dark Horse did their original Alien series. How versed in the expanded universe were you before taking a dip in it yourself?
Yeah, so I was very versed in the 90s. I read pretty much everything up to probably 98. So
pretty much all the old Dark Horse adaptions then.
And I still remember the original Alien versus Predator novelization based on the screen treatment that, was also adapted into a Capcom game.
So hang on, just a side tangent there on that point.
Yeah.
Yautja, yay or nay?
What?
The Yautja, the predators in it.
Oh, what? I don't actually remember them that well.
Fair enough.
What was it?
It was Perry. The Perrys did their own whole culture of the predators that they called the Yautja.
Oh right. Yes, and like they yeah, they talked about like the men laying eggs and the women and stuff like that and all that. Like they went through like the predator life cycle and mating and all that stuff too, right? Or is that a different predator book? They all kind of blur
Yeah.
together after a while.
I can't remember if you're thinking the Hish there. I definitely remember in Prey they had a point of Broken Tusk realizing that Machiko was a female because of her boobs.
Right,
Um,
right. Yes, yeah, that was it. That was it. That was so. I mean, like when you're in middle school, like that's you're like, yep, solid logic. Yeah, I mean, the ones that really stuck out to me from that era were, of course, Earth War, Nightmare Asylum, and Labyrinth.
mhm.
Because I mean, like, no one can deny how fucked up that scene at the end of Labyrinth. They, it was Church, right?
Yeah.
Was like reflecting on when they cut off his mom's arms and legs and tried to get him to breed with her.
Absolutely fucked up section.
That is the most fucked up thing I've ever read, period.
And it's probably one of the most memorable parts of the expanded universe as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh god, that was horrible. And then Music of the Spear or Music of the Spears. Aliens versus Ninjas. it was so good in comic form. And that's another one because the reason I loved Music of this was because it was so focused on the corporate politics.
Okay.
And I've always liked that stuff. That's one of the reasons why Alien is my favorite, is because like there's so much information about what life is like on Earth based in like, look at Ripley. She's considering it normal to be gone for 4 years when she has a new young daughter. Like, how horrible must life on Earth be? How shitty must the job situation that this is work,
The future.
Right, exactly. And I mean, like, companies like Uber really make it clear that that's where we're going.
You know what? Something I personally really like Music of the Spears.
Oh, yeah.
But I like it because it was so different.
Right.
It wasn't about breeding and training aliens.
Right.
It was this twisted guy who wanted to use them for music. I mean,
oh, I know. Wasn't that great? Like and that was hugely influential, by the way, on Dorian, because you remember that same guy, the first time he ever hears one, and he's like
pretty much falls in love with it. Yeah.
Right. That's the greatest thing I've ever heard. The scene where Dorian sees the alien for the first time. I mean, it's a bit of a retread of that when you really look at it, because it kind of taught me that like somebody could be fucked up enough to fall in love with this thing.
Oh, mate. What is it? Rule 30?
Rule 34.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It applies to aliens as well.
I don't doubt it. I haven't checked, but I don't know. I don't have to. I know it's true.
It is. Avoid.
That's funny. So yeah, that's so I read a bunch of them, and then I ended up I didn't read any of the modern ones really. I mean, I bought River of Pain and kind of started it to kind of see where Titan's Head was at.
Okay.
And because I just wanted again to kind of be able to hopefully control the interaction with them when I met with them.
So more of the ploys.
Yeah, well, with sales pitches like that, when you let stuff get away from you, especially when you're, I'm a baby author. I mean, let's face it. I had a debut novel out with a mid-range press at the time. Now I've got big 5 deals, but that wasn't where I was at. And, the person that you're talking to knows that. So you have to do everything in your power to make it clear, like, I understand your current mission. I need to figure out what your tastes are so that I can cater to them and maintain, hopefully, some control of this conversation. Because otherwise it's just, who the hell are you?
There is politics in everything. There is no denying that, is there?
Right.
So.
The real question is, do you have a structure for dealing with it or don't you?
Yeah. Can you play the game or not?
Exactly. I mean, if you're doing it to hurt people, that's
it's still completely different to getting a book published.
Well, I don't know, man. Book publishing is pretty brutal.
On you guys.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's definitely a one-way street.
Okay, so you were versed in the EU, not so much the newer stuff though. But then again, I guess you didn't really need to read the last 7 books. Yeah, 7 books that Titan put out for work on yours. I mean, it was pretty self-contained in its own right.
Yes, and I was actually told make it canon. So
yes, all the new stuff is canon.
Yeah, and so the safest approach to canon for me. Now, recognizing, of course, that Blomkamp wanted to delete 3 and 4, but it would be the first time that I've seen, aside from Spider-Man, where they've just been like, yeah, screw it, let's start over.
You got well, I suppose you got pretty much any of the superhero characters for that.
Right.
Or the Supermans, the Batmans.
Sure, absolutely. So I wanted to stick with the films because I felt like there was a good chance that as long as I only referenced things in the films, that I would get away with anything. And the weirdest part about it was when we started pitching, I was like, okay, so the thing from Prometheus, the super weapon,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I got a strong feeling about this. I think that's going to end up being the alien. And my editor, Steve Saffel, was like, nope, you can't use Prometheus. Nothing from Prometheus. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, oh, it's 2 separate licenses.
Yes, yeah.
And I was
Which
like,
is
oh,
weird because of then Covenant.
well, that's the great part. So as you know, the black goo factors really heavily in, it's one thing to like hand wave and be like, I extracted DNA from a face hugger. It's like, okay, how? What did you do? What is this? With the black goo, it's a lot easier to say like, I got the payload out of a face hugger. Which is a completely different thing. And then on top of that, knowing that the black goo, any amount of it touching you can rewrite your DNA. That means that it's a faster bacteriophage, sorry, it's not a virus, than CRISPR, which is what we currently use to rewrite DNA. So that closes a plot hole with modern science as long as the black goo is touchable, right? And so I start writing the book. I'm getting about a month in, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to work this? I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to have her just pulling out DNA and being like, yeah, I got the DNA. And then all of a sudden, Covenant comes out, and it's got everything from Prometheus already factored in, including, from the short film that came out alongside it. And so I was like, fuck it, I don't have to make any changes now. And I just like went ahead, and then let me tell you, when I sent this thing to Titan and when I sent it to Fox, I was like in pre-flinch mode. I was like, they're going to come back. They're going to make all of these changes. Titan just made a few, like, I would like it to be phrased this kind of way changes, and like add a little more corporate conspiracy here kind of stuff. Like they wanted me to make the stuff with Siegs and more because before it was just kind of reference.
Okay.
And then the Fox execs said change nothing. They loved the entire thing and sent back a full-page letter of compliment.
Nice.
I know. It's apparently the only time it's really ever happened. So I was like, I'll take that, because you're paid a flat rate when you do these books, and so any extra work is against your profit.
You corporate.
I know.
That's really interesting, actually, and it worked out. It's interesting because the idea of so what we're talking about here is I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, is Plagiarius
Prepotens.
Okay, which is what Dr. Blue Marsalis. I'm terrible with pronouncing names.
No, it's okay.
On my life. That's what she named the payload that the facehuggers inject.
Yes.
Into the hosts. So rather than an infant chest burster, it's this. Did you call it a protein?
It's a bacteria.
A bacteria into the host, which then facilitates the growth of the chest burster. Now that's interesting because that has been one of the I guess less prolific fan theories from back in the 90s.
Interesting. I didn't know about this. What?
There's a guy who goes by the name of Thetis, the planet the Nostromo departed from in Alien, and he was interested in all like the biology stuff back in the days, and he used to run a website called the Anchor Point Essays. Anchor Point's an alternate Alien 3 name.
Okay.
And he used to go into the biology of the alien and how it might work in the real world.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure the website's not up anymore, unfortunately, but you can get on it on Wayback Machine.
Sure.
And that was one of the things he said was, it rewriting DNA and facilitating the growth from within the body rather than actually implanting anything. So I thought that was really interesting when you went down that route.
Well, and I mean, it all but directly says it in Covenant. It kind of, because, David is like, I eliminated all of the flora and fauna on this planet by gradually infecting everything and testing it. And he does the classic kind of Linnaean genetics, where it's just like, I'm just gonna breed these things together, see what happens. And so he the thing is, I was looking at what tools he had. The goo is like the number one thing that he has, and then later when you see it come out of this, and it's and that creates the neomorph. I thought that's got to be it. That's got to be what's happening. And the other thing is, when you really look at, if a facehugger were injecting a larval chest burster, then why does it take on so many qualities of the host? That was kind of why I wanted to move in that direction, because it makes so much sense if it doesn't take on the qualities of the host. It's harvesting your cellular structure, and eventually uses the most tireless muscle in your body to bust out of you. Then that makes a lot more sense to me. The other thing that I kind of was working with on that one was, and we don't, I don't know if I put a direct reference or not. It may have come out, but the reason I chose a bacteria as opposed to a virus, because I think virus is kind of the hot term when they think about the black goo. It's a virus, super virus. Virus is the most kind of infectious word in our language.
All right.
But that's how does the chest burster gain so much mass so quickly, and what is the resin based on? And the chest bursters, it's not like it's running around the ship eating cats. So one of the things that I thought was, well, what if this was related to the Metallosphera bacteria, the extremophilic bacteria that live like next to volcanoes and eat metal? Then you can start to say that this thing is partially metallic, part of where its armor structure comes from. That's where that cool resin stuff comes from. If it could just glean it natively by passing it. But of course, the producers weren't kind enough to put a bunch of scuffed metal surfaces anytime there was a chest burster. So anyway.
You mentioned the DNA reflex thing, the trait of the alien taking on host traits.
Yes.
Oh, it's not something that really gets played up a lot on in the expanded universe. The Pred-Alien and the Runner's probably the most obvious and prolific times that's been used. You went for chimpanzees, and you made a deliberate point of it looking different to the research that they got to hand, which was something that I quite liked.
So exactly. The snatchers, which is what I call the xenomorph, because xenomorph is kind of a silly term when you really think about it. Which was also
something else I really liked that you put in there as well.
Like, we know it's the xenomorph, like that's the brand, like that, it's xenomorph TM to us, but like if you were a scientist and you just heard that, you'd be like, what moron named this thing?
It applies to pretty much everything, doesn't it?
Right. It's a truck you haven't seen yet is a xenomorph, So yeah, the part that I really enjoyed writing about that was talking about especially the arm, because how disturbing would it be if the snatchers come out and they've got kind of chimp like proportions, but the pictures that you were furnished have human proportions. It'd be like, oh somebody before me had a tough time.
Yeah, so sorry, that sort of distracted me then with that one. It was just something I actually really liked in it.
Oh, thank you.
Now, we were talking about the Plagarius earlier, and there was a bit in the book where you've got Sudler fantasizing about turning into an alien.
Yes.
Piddling his skin back and seeing the biomechanical stuff under it. And I had a feeling that you might be going in the direction of him coming in contact with it and maybe sort of transforming. I was wondering if you ever had any plans to go further with the substance that didn't make it into the book.
Oh my God, that never was.
Well, you see that, but they did it. They sort of did it in some of the recent comics.
Oh, really? I haven't read but I mean, I guess I kind of see what you. Yeah, I mean that is a cool angle, but no, it was definitely a so one of the big themes, and not like blood like gore, but blood like what are you made of? What are you really made of? Because Blue starts the book off as being very distant and hard to understand, and her colleagues don't really like her, and they think of her as an android, and so she thinks of herself as being white-blooded. And Dorian starts off the book, he shows up, he's charming all the humans and getting laid, and he thinks of himself as very red-blooded. And by the end of the book, Blue is actually bleeding and actually dragging herself through this hellscape, and Dorian is the one who's like, so she's become a human, and he's the one who, well, I'm actually an alien. you know?
Mm.
So, and he kind of gets his way right at the end.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
definitely comes in contact.
Got more than he was expecting.
I don't know. I think he was pretty happy at the end.
But then again, you had him earlier on, sort of getting pretty excited about the notion of his own genetic material being
Married
in
up.
one of the, yeah. So yeah, I suppose he might have maybe
I,
not so keen on the the violent death and everything, but
Sure. Yeah. Well, there are worse things. The guy runs triathlons. I'm sure he's used to pain.
well. And speaking of worse things, and speaking of what we were talking about earlier, with the prequels, what are your thoughts on Prometheus and Covenant?
So I think that Prometheus and Covenant are two really exciting stories, photographed beautifully and put together poorly. I still love them, but especially as a writer, I have a lot of problems. That doesn't stop me from coming out and going, well, Prometheus, I came out of the theater and I was like, wait, what? Just because Ridley Scott was so subtle and so clever in the first one, and I guess I kind of expected that. And
it's when I think a lot of people started to really realize that there was more to Alien than just Ridley Scott.
I know, because yeah, and I mean, look, if you'd have told me back in the day that, you were teaming up Ridley Scott with Damien Lindelof, I'd be like, wow, that's gonna be perfect. You can't go wrong, right? And all the run up press and publicity, really put me on that path. And I got over it pretty quickly because I lived through the Star Wars prequels too, and so I was like, you know what? Maybe just enjoy the alien that exists in your mind. Just recognize it's not yours. You don't get to contribute to it. Which at the time Prometheus came out, I didn't know I would be allowed to contribute. So just say it's not yours. Leave it alone. You're never gonna get to tell your alien story.
So it's all right. That's what fan fiction's for.
Exactly.
There's always an outlet.
And I love telling, because I've got a bunch of writer friends who they poof fan fiction a little bit, but then they're like, but you're writing a tie-in, that's cool. I'm like, it's just fan fiction you got paid for, man. Like, it's team fan fiction.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, I definitely have written fan fiction. Like, for instance, I think that Shaw is a really good and exciting character, played really remarkably well. Fassbender as David, and later Walter, is fantastic. You have real top flight actors, but then you've got things like, we found this planet by looking at some rocks on the Isle of Man. And it's like, well, who gave them the rocks? Like, okay, so ancient humans were made of engineered DNA and then carved themselves a map into the cave. Where did the map come from? Did the engineers show up once and go, how's it going? They don't say that in the movie. So it just looks like we just natively were like, all right, this is how you get back to Super Weapon Central.
We don't want you there. We don't want you there, so don't come.
Right. And so I have a theory about that. And then, they show up, they go into obviously an alien-made structure, and Holloway's like, oh, they're all dead. I can't believe it. And it's like, Holloway, first of all, you did just find an alien civilization, so, be excited. And second of all, you've explored 0.1%. There are warehouses for miles. Just go to the next one, see if anybody's home.
At the end of the day, they were archaeologists as well. They should be excited about dead cultures.
I know. Well, there were archaeologists that couldn't, find their way out even when they had a laser map.
Oh no, he was a geologist. You got to give him a break.
Right.
No, that irritates.
And the biologist that was with him.
Yes.
Does he get a break too?
No, he does
broken
not
arm.
Break. I enjoy seeing the scientists and the biologists, the videos where they're ripping them apart.
Oh yeah. Well, and that was the other problem. So if you look in the back of the Cold Forge, you see that I have a battery of doctorate having scientists that I asked a bunch of questions. And doctorate physicist, virologist, entomologist, right? So you can't have fun around these guys sometimes. Like, most of my scientist friends know how to cut loose, but periodically they will say what's going on, And so Prometheus, again, its central question about what if you meet your creator and it's an uncaring being, or it's something that's appointed in you, or and and the central question of Covenant, where David has to create something greater than himself, something greater than his father, because his father was so fallible and so weak. And like,
Mm.
again, that's something like it's really, really interesting to me. And Covenant, furthermore, makes the entire Alien series look like a weird gothic love story. And what's crazy is I somebody pointed out a Tumblr to me that's called Alien: A Gothic Love Story.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of Clara's friends, I think. I think you spoke to Clara before, haven't you?
I did,
Mm.
and yeah, that was it. She pointed it out, and it was like, okay, I'm not the only one thinking this way, because she'd asked me before I saw it, and I was like, yeah, I think that the fact that David deliberately incorporated Shaw's DNA into his greatest creation makes it a love letter to her.
In its own twisted way, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he killed her because he wanted to make sure that she couldn't be alive long enough to disappoint him like his father.
See, there was, I think, Fassbender in one of the interviews, he went down the road of saying that David killed her because he didn't want her to leave him, and that way she could never.
Yep.
Which is, psychopathic tendency, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and like the care that he's taken to preserve her. I mean, like, he wants her to be beautiful forever. Vivisected but beautiful. Covenant. I enjoyed a lot of what I saw in it, but there was first of all the fact that the entire middle third of the movie, probably most of the movie, takes place in 3 rooms is kind of weird. Because
I never really noticed that, to be honest. As in, it didn't bother me.
There's the rotunda, there's David's lab, and then there's the little water area.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And the Hall of Heads, yeah.
The occasional foray into the nest. But I mean, like, the entire movie essentially takes place in an area the size of the set of Friends. Like. And that's not necessarily terrible, but I was kind of used to labyrinthine, like, I would have, I loved the fact that they were going outdoors. I love the fact that they were like really exploring the engineering civilization. I was, let's get it right this time. And I will say this, I came out of Covenant going, that didn't suck.
See, I actually quite like Covenant.
And it was, well, there you go.
The only issues I have with that is the end, when I feel like the alien was pretty much just squished in and inserted into the film.
Oh, that shot though, as I was telling you earlier,
the money shot in the trailers.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, that seeing the Xenomorphs and then whatever that slightly taller one was, the weird kind of butt mouth.
Yeah, they were all Xenomorphs.
Oh, they were all Xenomorphs. Okay.
Yeah,
seeing them and then seeing the Xenomorph in comparison, it was like, oh, perfection achieved. Like, you did it. And of course, if you couldn't see the double cross coming a mile away in Covenant,
you knew it was going to happen as soon as there was 2 of them.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. Well, and it's when he started cutting his hair that I was like, yep.
Well, it's funny because they apparently made it more obvious, because during some of the testing, people didn't quite get that it was supposed to be David at the end of it.
Are you shitting me?
No.
Oh,
people, well, a bunch of bastards.
Oh, I know it. So yeah, there's my thoughts on Covenant and Prometheus.
Okay, I had to get it out of the way. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Everybody asked me this. The most awkward time was, at my signing, really lovely gentleman showed up.
That was today, wasn't it?
Yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
Alien Day in the United States. These really lovely gentlemen showed up wearing, Weyland-Yutani shirts, USCM patches and stuff, and I was like, oh man, some super fans. And then they come up and they go, what did you think of Covenant? Because it kind of ruined my childhood. And I was like, I don't know how to please you right now. Like, you're very nice people, but now I'm really worried that this interaction is not going to go the way I want it to. I don't know. Yeah, it was terrible. You want to buy a book?
My book's better here.
Yeah. Well, that I will say. Yeah.
I won't argue with that one.
Nice.
So you mentioned earlier you had, and it was in the acknowledgements in the book, was you had a lot of input from actual scientists, from people involved in the field.
Yes.
So how much exactly did you rely on those guys? And did you also get the same kind of input for writing Blue?
Yes. So for writing, let's start with first the scientist. For all of the spacewalk scenes, the physicist Dr. Grenade was heavily involved. For my theories about black goo, that went to the entomologist and virologist, who's Dr. Stevens. For my attempts to classify this animal and my two animal theory, which I'm like, please be I was that was the one that I was the most afraid of, was the idea that the facehugger is actually not a xenomorph at all. It's a symbiotic animal that's used as a payload delivery system. And so it lives in their DNA and they live in its, but it is not the same animal.
How would you factor in the queen in that then?
Well, she's got the blueprint. She can create them. It's kind of she makes the babies required. Um, and I didn't worry about the queen too terribly much. Like you can kind of hand wave the facehuggers into the queen pretty easily and say, well, the queen is different because she is part facehugger and she can create facehuggers. But that was, yeah, the difference between the Plagiaris praepotens and the Nox Hydra, the Menomela Nox Hydria. That was like that was a big, like, oh man, I hope they go for this. Yeah, my biologist friend, she helped me a lot with the taxonomy on that Solobalacine, and then as far as like naming the various appendages and stuff, because a lot of people will refer to the facehuggers, for lack of a better term, insertion. It's proboscis. People always call it a proboscis, but that's not etymologically correct, because a proboscis is for drawing something out.
Right. Okay.
So it's what mosquitoes have. It's a feeding mechanism. And then at the same time, you definitely can't call it an ovipositor, because even if we assumed that it was laying a larval chest burster, that wasn't the case. Because a larval chest burster is not an egg, so it's not an ovipositor. So it's a pharynx. And this high school biology teacher, she and I went back and forth on all of the different structures, trying to talk about, okay, what would they actually be called? And she was so incredibly well versed in kind of the stuff that like doctoral people forget. Once they specialize, they're out of the basic naming structures and nomenclature kind of stuff. And so this high school biology teacher was like an indispensable resource. And it was great because I could take her stuff back to the other scientists and say, what do you think? And they go, oh wow, yeah, that's right, oh, forgot about that. And now as far as my assistance with writing Blue, you're talking about in terms of her medical condition.
Yeah, and portraying her.
Sure. So as I said, at the time, one of my friend's fathers passed away from ALS. I got to hear the gritty details of his day-to-day life. And then also one of my really close friends has a terminally ill child, who is still with us, which is great. And but it's heartbreaking because she's a 10-year-old girl. She's got a disease that nobody's ever lived past 20 with, and it's an ultra rare genetic disorder. And so seeing the kinds of things that she has to do with her feeding tube and with the colostomy bag, and seeing the complications that can come from intubation, because I think everybody thinks that, like, oh, if you start choking, they can just shove a tube down your throat, and yeah, that works for a minute, but then you usually catch pneumonia. And if you're immune compromised, that's even worse. And so Bashara syndrome is the made up disease that I threw in there because
it was initially announced as ALS, if I remember rightly.
It was, and that's because my agent didn't pay attention to the synopsis I sent him.
Fair enough.
Because I'd said that ALS was my inspiration to him, and he just kind of goes, "Oh, she has ALS." But the thing is, my assumption is that far off in the future, ALS will have some treatment for it. But the cool thing about Bashara syndrome, if you look at the way I've described it, it's a series of epigenetic disorders that come from colonizing. So the idea is that, basically because your grandparents were colonists and because they were exposed to all the different radiations and toxins of space life, that you now, years and years and years and years
Passed
later,
on genetically, yeah.
right, have an epigenetic disorder. So yeah, that's why I went with that one, is because it makes it really hard to cure. If it's just this thing that kind of comes from random mutations and that no two presentations of it are ever the same, that means that the only thing that can cure it is something that rewrites your DNA completely.
Which is pretty hard to do.
Right. Unless you have the
Black
super
goo.
weapon. Yeah, the black goo. The black goo does exactly that.
Mm.
Yeah, like I said, when I saw those spores, I was like, plot hole closed.
So something that took me back pretty much immediately when I started reading the book, and it was just because I'm so not used to it, was that you were writing in the present tense.
Yes.
Why did you go for that approach? Is that your style?
It is not. None of my other books are written in present tense. The reason I chose present tense, I haven't. This was the first published horror book that I've done. Certainly, Every Mountain Made Low has horrific elements, but it is not inherently a horror. It's much more of a thriller. But the reason I like present tense, especially with third person, is because when you're reading a story, you still have a narrator in your mind. There's still somebody kind of telling you the story. And when it happened in the past, that kind of makes it sound like somebody lived.
Okay. Yeah, I can
And
see the thinking with that.
right, exactly. Like, yeah, she ducked out of the way. She did this in the past. She did that in the past, and then she made it out. Big surprise. But the thing I liked about present tense is that it makes it sound kind of iffy. I think it makes it sound a lot more iffy.
Yeah, I can get that. And once I settled into it, I thought it was perfectly fine and it worked.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of like, I was initially shocked by the present tense, and now I like it kind of comments, including from the editor. Like, he didn't know, or he'd forgotten that we had agreed to do that ahead of time. But he contracts for it. He sees it like 4 months later. And then if you count the pitches, it's like 2 years and 4 months later.
So how long were you working on the book then? So two and a bit.
So I came up with the pitch 2 years ago in 2016, and the contract came through in June of 2017, due in October, and I started immediately. And I turned it in a week ahead of time. So 3 months and 3 weeks was how long I worked on that pitch, or how long I worked on that novel. I've never written something so fast in my entire life, and I'm told that the Star Wars deadlines are even faster.
Yeah, I was about to say, I thought the tie-in stuff tended to be like 3 months kind of thing. They want them flipped over really fast.
I kind of knew it was going to be like that, but I didn't know it was going to be that bad. It took every waking minute, and I think that's part of why it's so super cohesive, is because I was living that book for 3 months.
No gaps in memory of what was happening.
Exactly. I didn't have to. Yeah, there's never a point where I went, I was interrupted. I need to come back to this.
Silver lining and everything.
That's right.
So, anybody who's sort of seen my comments on your book will know how much I loved it and how much praise I had for it. But
that was great.
You did not escape without one nitpick that I know a few of us had, and that was where Wayland sourced the eggs from. Yeah. Now, was that something you and Titan and Fox thought about at all? Do you have an answer for that, or is it just...
I have an answer for it. I just didn't think it was important to the narrative.
Well, the thing is, as I was reading it, I didn't give a crap. But then when, you sat down to think about it, it was like, where did they come from?
So here's where they got the eggs. And I can, I did know, but again, the problem is no one in the narrative had the clearance to know where they got the eggs from. Like, the eggs show up, when you work on a classified project and you get your materials from another place, you don't get to know anything about the people that gave you the materials. In some cases, the people that gave you the materials might not be American at all, for example, that kind of stuff. And so you don't want to, if you know everything, there's a good chance that you could give things away and get people killed. And so they try to keep everybody kind of just stupid enough to not see the entire picture. And Weyland-Yutani wouldn't be any different.
I thought it worked really well in the narrative. That's why I didn't care while I was reading it.
Sure. Well, I'm getting to your answer. So Carter Burke is like, okay, so first of all, somebody at the company wanted that organism from LV-426 in the very first movie. somebody at the company was like, and maybe it was just Mother, right? It's never really clear. Did Mother act alone, or was she given orders? What made the crew expendable? If she was given orders, that means somebody at the company already knew about the xenomorph, and decided that the crew was expendable, and diverted a mining ship, which is the wackiest thing. I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars blown up, just so they could maybe take a swing at this thing. And then but even if we assume that that's not the case, but they review the flight logs, and then it's okay, well, we know about the xenomorph now, right? We don't know exactly, it's never clear exactly how long Ripley's on Gateway Station, for example. How long was she in medical care? How long was she in transit to Gateway Station? Because she was found drifting through the core systems. So even then, they could have transmitted the flight logs back, and the company could have known for months ahead, years ahead, because it just doesn't say. And so
she was there long enough to get license as well for the power loaders.
right. So yeah, exactly, you don't do that overnight, right? So Burke had to go probably before some kind of governance board. He's the director of special operations, and he had to say, I think we really need to investigate the possibility of creating some of these things and weaponizing them, or he wanted them, right? He says, think of the applications. And they said no, but they did set up a colony out there, and he still got his way. He still got the colonists infected, but that being said, the site gets nuked. Now, Burke is a putz. He's terrible at his job. I mean, he's really, really bad at his job. And I mean, like, for example, the director of special operations, I mean, that means that he has extreme knowledge of every classified project that Weyland-Yutani's doing. And he went himself when he probably has 20 to 50 to 100 people working for him. Why would he do that? Other than complete incompetence, which is apparently the answer. So that means that somebody else at the company has to know about these things too. And while he's trying to set up this, grand, thing, this person with knowledge of everything that's on the flight recorders could have been setting up an additionally compartmentalized project. They could have landed, picked up some eggs, transported them off-world, because you notice that I say that the eggs they're listed as being worth X number of dollars in logistical costs, but they're totally priceless.
Mm-hmm.
So they could have landed, picked up some eggs, transported them off-world, transported them to the Cold Forge, and then Aliens starts. Because also the Cold Forge can't have been built overnight.
Yeah, but didn't you have it as being an old prison facility?
I said that it was the modules were from a prison facility.
Okay.
So that's the other thing is, like, for instance, in the United States, we have not bought a complete weapon system since the Kiowa Warrior in 1986, which means that whenever you see the cool Navy SEALs jumping out with their Tom Clancy gear of a Black Hawk, that Black Hawk probably was in Vietnam. Like, it's like a 60-year-old helicopter. And, we build more of them, obviously, but a lot of these things running around, pretty old. And so when it comes time to create a new project, a lot of times we just go, oh, well, we got some of this, we got some of that, let's put it all together. That doesn't necessarily mean that there was a prison around the Stark Kaufman.
Okay.
That just means that they garbaged together some, random crap and made a Cold Forge. Yeah. So where the eggs came from is that somebody else at the company had foreknowledge and landed at LV-426 before Hadley's Hope really took off. Before the so-called shake and bake colony, because that's the other thing is, it's 8 years, because Van Leeuwen says how long they've been there.
I'm trying to think. Yeah,
they've been there for over X number of years. That means that company surveyors have probably been over most of that world. Somebody would have seen the derelict, and it's no one said they shut off the signal.
There's all sorts for the signal thing,
right?
Which was Cameron said it was volcanic damage, damage in the ship.
Oh,
isolation as you turn it off in that.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's just a long way to say that they easily could have had multiple eggs, 30, 40, 100 eggs, and there's nothing to say that they couldn't have,
Huh?
you know. So I think the eggs came from LV-426, and I think they were there. I think company people have been in that ship before they sent colonists over there, and I think Burke was wanting to get some big coup, and he was willing to use Van Leeuwen's colony to do it.
Okay, I think I'll buy that.
Well, good. That's the only answer I got.
That's fair enough. Now, speaking of isolation,
Yes.
you totally played that before working on the Cold Forge, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it felt like your aliens were stompy, as I like to call him from that game.
They are so stompy, and I'm glad you noticed that, because that was the thing that shook me the hardest about that game. Because I played it in the dark with my Dolby Atmos headphones. You know, like
The only way to do that. It's the only way to play that game.
No, there's one more way to play it, which is with a high definition Vive Pro.
The common man can't afford that crap.
Well, and also you want to live through the experience, right?
First time I played that, I ended up having an adrenaline come down
I know,
outside the room.
So fucking scary. But yeah, when the first time I was noticed by the alien and I go stomp, 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 and it stopped being subtle, that was when I was like, oh my God, these things weigh a ton. I never really thought about that before. The only reason they're so silent is because they're able to kind of compensate for their body mass, but when they don't give a shit anymore.
It's over. They don't need stealth.
Exactly. Right. So that was why, that's why Cold Forge aliens kind of have that sound, is I was trying to write the sounds from Isolation. So I'm so glad you noticed that. That's so cool. Obviously, I would have played Isolation anyway, but I think it's funny that you noticed it because of the sound and because of my writing, and that's great.
It just felt like it. I was like, he's totally spent hours on this game as inspiration and influenced him on this.
Oh yeah, and you'll also notice, like, Prometheus and Covenant, all the tech in there was like,
a teeny bit more advanced than what you'd seen,
and all this other stuff. And the Cold Forge, I was like, no, everything's got clacky keyboards and they're all smoke stained. And there were people like smoking on the space station, like Dorian smokes, and like Blue says, she has a portable terminal, not a tablet. Stuff like that, which it's funny because it's anti-ergonomic and it's retrofuturism, but that's one of the things that I loved about Isolation, is they leaned in hard to that.
Well, especially when it's one of the major things that people have an issue with the prequels.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same as kind of the Star Trek problem. Like, our cell phone's better than a tricorder. Nothing to be done about that.
Our cell phones are better than the Apollo missions and modules, aren't they?
That's true, but I imagine my cell phone crashes a lot more.
Fortunately for them.
That's right. Yeah, it's always funny because even when the challenge when the space shuttle program was in effect, and everybody would always say, like, oh, your graphing calculator is more powerful than the orbital computer on the space shuttle. And it's like, yes, the difference is that the orbital computer on the space shuttle can be repaired by the pilot with a soldering iron, and never fails ever.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because you've got the Voyagers from the 70s still out there operating after all this time.
Exactly.
And our iPhones and our smartphones last 2 years.
Well, and that's the difference between, when people say like military technology, I think there's always this kind of idea that it means that it's, super advanced and all that other stuff. Super advanced cutting edge technology is incredibly fragile.
Mm-hmm. More prone to failure, aren't they?
Exactly. Extremely prone to failure. And you want these things to be able to be dropped, deployed in the rain, that kind of stuff. And so when you get these guys who like buy military gear for themselves, for example, like a Tough Book or something, it's always really funny to me, because they're taking a deliberate step down in terms of quality, or not in terms of quality, in terms of advancement. And they're paying a lot more for it. and when they don't do anything with it, it's kind of like the soccer mom who buys a Land Rover. Like, okay, but you should go on safari when you have one of those. That's what they're for. So yeah. Anyway, that's my digression.
Tangent for the episode.
Yeah.
No, but it's still interesting. I enjoy that kind of
Good.
kind of stuff.
Well, my day job is all about the human's place in a technological system. So user experience is multifaceted. It's about clarity, empowerment, and delight. And you can actually see this in my writing as well. That's I always ask myself 5 questions when I'm starting to write a scene. I ask myself, who wants what, from whom do they want it, and what's going to happen if they don't get it? That's the first question. So that is the central conflict of any scene clear. Then what do the readers expect? Because you have to deliver some element of what the readers expected. And so, the plot of the Cold Forge is what the readers expected. Or at least the bare bones plot of the Cold Forge is what the readers expected. And that's the question of empowerment, right? Do people feel like they're able to express preference over what's happening? And then delight is what don't the readers expect? And that doesn't mean that it always has to be a twist. Sometimes what the reader doesn't expect is in the case of Isolation, how heavy the damn alien is. That's something that none of us, I think, had considered, because Cameron's aliens look like little ninjas, and
that's what zip wires do for you.
Right, and Ridley Scott's alien couldn't run, and so it wasn't until and in Alien 3, I mean, it's very gangly and kind of spindly, and and so it's it wasn't until you're like deeply immersed that so the delight for me in Isolation, a big part of the delight was seeing the old text, seeing how heavy the aliens were, that kind of stuff. And those were things that I kind of wanted to do in Cold Forge. Was I wanted to set up an archetype with Blue. She's a geneticist who's trying to cure all genetic diseases, and she's willing to embezzle from a deeply corrupt and frightening company to do it, and then have her blackmailing Kambili because she wants to maintain her survival, and she can't do it alone. And then even that can kind of seem noble until Kambili's poor face gets snatched off, and he asks her the question, why is your life worth more than mine? So those are the delight factors. I know that doesn't sound delightful, it sounds like a bummer, but you didn't see it coming, and and I think a lot of people are kind of shocked at all the characters and what they're capable of.
Because even Kambili was a bastard in his own right, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was screwing Lucy Biltmore.
Lucy.
Yeah, and like I made it clear, I was like, not he was here and was under pressure and then screwed Lucy Biltmore, like day one screwing Lucy Biltmore. Okay, so I gotta ask you this. This was a little bit of a psychological experiment that I conducted with the book, and I'm dying to know the answer here. Okay. What did you think of Lucy?
I kind of sympathized with Sudler in that she was just annoyingly weak. I guess.
Right. So originally, when I wrote the book, Lucy was a very bland character. Like, you wouldn't remember her.
Okay.
And so it kind of made the reversal when it was like, well, she was actually the leak. That was that had no impact. And this is even before I turned it into Titan. And I thought, what if I just made everybody describe her in really hateful terms? I didn't really change any of her lines. She doesn't say anything that the rest of us wouldn't say. But I talk about her fish lips and her annoying, face and her stupid laugh, and that's just all the characters flavoring the text. Dorian and Blue both don't like her, but all the sane people on the station do. And there's that interaction with her and Carrie when she realizes that all the cages are unlocked, and so it's pretty normal, but then you go back to the other narratives, and it's like, this yodel-throated, annoying, like. And it's funny because a lot of people were like, man, I really hated her, and I'd be like, why? And they'd be like, she just, I don't know, she just seemed annoying. I wanted to see, and it was just really fun to see, like, if somebody who did nothing really wrong on the page could come off as totally obnoxious because the characters hated her.
That's really interesting.
So yeah, I guess there is a little bit of Sudler in me.
Conducting experiments on your readers. I don't know.
It was just a kind of a lark, and it's funny because that meant that she became memorable without me necessarily having to do a whole bunch of extra
Anything
character
special with
development.
it,
Yeah, so it saved me a bunch of work.
That's actually a really interesting technique.
Thank you.
You in this book, I can't give you enough credit with this.
Oh, thank you. I really, I gotta tell you, I was so nervous about what the reaction of the hardcore fans was going to be because I was on so when we announced the book last DragonCon, I was on the panel and ahead of the panel, and I was like really excited for my big announcement, and I couldn't wait. Baby author gets on the stage with all these other people that are pretty well known. The lady says, something about the slings and arrows of publishing, and I was like, yeah, I'm a debut author, so I get that. And she was like, no, I meant like the death threats. I was like, what kind of death threats are you talking about? And she's like, well, I write, kind of a variation on Robin Hood, and I've gotten death threats over my portrayal of Robin Hood. And I was like, that's ridiculous. It's in public domain. There's no official Robin Hood. Like, how can this be? And then the guy next to her is like, oh yeah, he's like writing arrow tie-ins. He's like, oh, I get death threats too. I was like, no way. That's what Arrow. Like that's pretty wholesome show. Like I can't imagine somebody like being like, I'm gonna kill you over Arrow. And then the guy at the end of the table goes, oh yeah, no, your day is coming. And I was like, well, what do you write? And he's like, I write for Planet of the Apes. And I was like, come on, like nobody can be that mad about Planet of the Apes. And so I was like, I was just like, what is the fan reaction going to be? And then, and then the cover comes out and the fans are kind of mad about the cover, especially like the fact that there were 5 smokestacks and there were a couple of like, oh, this is the plot of Alien Resurrection and Labyrinth and Rogue, so don't read it. And I was like, oh no. And then when it comes out, I'm getting all these fans like, I read it overnight and I loved it. I was blown away. And your support of my book was also, I mean, like that, again, I can't stress enough how worried I was about bringing something that was tonally consistent with Alien into the world and making sure that it was something that everybody could kind of sink their teeth into. Yeah, I'm
happy with the response then.
Yeah, you could say that.
Not just because you've avoided the death threats.
Not just because I've avoided the death threats, but you gotta know that my excitement at that panel diminished significantly. Like I like shrunk in my seat, and then Steve's like, and coming soon, Alien: The Cold Forge, and I'm just like, oh god, what have I done?
That can't have been the first time you realized that people were bastards.
No, but they didn't pay much attention to me before. It's the fan response has been incredible, and then the industry response has been incredible too. So I'm just, right now I'm wondering if I'm ever going to have something that's this critically well received ever again. And it's weird because it's a tie-in, but
they generally look down a little on, aren't they?
They are, and I don't, I'm not like mad about it. It's just it's work for hire. I don't get an extra dime if it goes bestseller. And I don't mind that. I knew that when I signed up. But, it's just kind of weird to be like, oh, it was a home run with the studio execs. It was a home run with the industry blogs. It was a home run with the film critic from Birth Movies Death. And it's a home run with the hardcore fans. Like, that's never going to happen again. And I have to be okay with that the next time. I think it's funny, people often think that tie-in novels are phoned in, and maybe some authors are capable of doing that. But man, I could never put my name on a book if I didn't love it.
Well, that's the kind of attitude you need.
Yeah.
I've read tie-ins before where it just felt phoned. I've read Alien and Predator novels where it felt phoned in before.
Yeah, though when you're in middle school, every Alien and Predator novel is good. Like I never read a bad one. You know what I mean? Like, and I haven't gone back and reread them because I'm like,
I have been lately, actually.
oh yeah, are they still good? Do they hold up?
Depends. Like,
Oh,
I read one last year where it just felt so ridiculously phoned in, which was Big Game. I think it was Predator.
oh, yeah, I read that one.
I did not enjoy that one. But
Yeah.
some of them still feel great, and I don't know, it's perspective when you're growing up, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. Well, and I gotta tell you, like when I was in middle school, I also read all of William Shatner's Tech War. So, and I loved it. And now that I'm an adult, I was like, what is wrong with you? That is not a good book. It's objectively bad series. But man, it was what a middle school kid thought that noir could be. You know, like.
See, I daren't read Dune again.
Oh
Just
no.
in case my perspective on it changes.
Yeah, just leave it.
So I just have such great memories of the book being fantastic. I just don't want to. I don't want to risk it.
It's classics are generally pretty safe though. It's the stuff that fell off the shelf and never came back that it's like just leave it off the shelf.
It's fair enough. This Star Trek books I won't bother with as well.
Yeah,
because of that.
There's one Star Trek book and I can't remember what it was, but it's just the only memory I have of this particular Star Trek book was Worf had his bat'leth out and he was gonna charge up a hill to like fight somebody, but instead of charging up the hill, the author used the verb scampered. I was like,
that's a good mental image.
I know. I was like, Worf's gonna scamper up the hill. Just like that sounds very like, like he's like a ballerina. Like not.
Well, that's a risky run with the alien stuff as well. Describing them.
Oh yeah.
Sneaking down.
Yeah, it was because you could see using the term scamper, and maybe I would have before I played Isolation, but I was like, those things don't scamper. Yeah, well, and actually, speaking of describing the alien, it is impossible to describe the alien, any of it, without accidentally sounding like you're describing sex organs, like, and that's because they are, but like, eventually I just kind of embraced it and I was like, the face hugger, it had kind of a scrotum on it, Because, yep.
The other interesting thing was in how Sudler sort of fetishized them.
Oh yes.
I guess that's kind of the way some fans feel about. Well, not necessarily. I mean, you're sort of mesmerized by Giger's work and the designs of them.
Well, and the way that
they're being infused with the sexual stuff deliberately anyway by him.
Right, and the way that they are portrayed by the actors who inhabit the suits and the animators and all that stuff. I mean, they are really beautiful in a weird kind of way. But like, unlike Sudler, I don't want to be anywhere near them. Whereas I think he would definitely fuck an alien. At least by the end of the book.
I don't know. You made sure there was no mention of genitals.
Right. Oh yeah.
Of course he did look and check, didn't he?
He did. He totally checks one out. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. So yeah, and it was kind of it was also like he sees them as transcendent of sex by the end of the book. Also, I think he has like kind of a little bit of a villainous monologue about it raping its way into the world, only to have no discernible or sex afterwards. Like it's become greater than human because it has eschewed sexuality somehow, and like that's the kind of weird shit that you think of at 3 a.m. when you read Deadline.
I don't know. It worked well enough for so long.
Oh, it was definitely creepy, and like there was a lot of times when I went back and read some of his stuff, and I was like, I was out of my head.
Where does that come from?
With Blue, it's so easy to kind of say like she's just a utilitarian. Whatever's required, she's going to do it, and sometimes that means that people are going to get hurt, but she's going to make sure that people don't get hurt more than they have to. And with Dorian, it's so much more. I mean, it was just. I hate to say he's more fun to write because he is the villain of the piece, and I identify really strongly with Blue and her perspective because, my wife has multiple sclerosis. My son is 10 years old and can't speak. He's autistic. And so I care deeply about people with disabilities. I want to make sure that they're portrayed well. That being said, Dorian was way more fun and easier to write.
Isn't there a thing about villains just being more fun in general for people to play with?
I know, and he's simplistically evil in a lot of ways. Like, well, that's not true. He's the other thing. You know how he made constant reference to his dad?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to get the idea that his father was somehow abusive, but I think the truth is that his dad was probably an academic and just disappointed in him and becoming, a corporate shill. And Dorian is so entitled that he has to take out his revenge on everyone else for that, much like David. So yeah, it was much more like, with Dorian I really wanted to write entitlement. That is his number one flaw, because he feels like the world belongs to him, like he should have everything he wants all the time,
and he thinks he's better than everything.
Yes, there's no one
apart from the aliens.
I think that was it your review that said that he had a moral code that only he could live up to?
No, it's a bit too sophisticated for me.
Oh, come on. Well, it was but I mean, you're correct. He does. He definitely has a moral code, and it is definitely one that only he really fits. So, but yeah.
So yeah, I guess that covers what your favorite aspect of working on the Cold Forge was.
Yes. The whole thing was awesome. I mean, it was great to write.
If you did have the opportunity, now that it's come out, now that you've seen it again, is there anything you would like to change with the book?
Oh no, I might throw in a reference to where the eggs came from. Just try to. I don't know. I would have to. I don't know where I would fit it in.
But it didn't matter to the plot. It didn't matter to the narrative. It's
right.
Just one of those things that you think afterwards.
It's such an information leak kind of thing to know. That's the only. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody in there knew it, then that means that the classification of the project has failed. So like, how would you handle that? Actually, you read the book. Do you have any suggestions for me?
No, because like I said, I didn't care.
Oh, good. All right.
It wasn't until I was done reading it and we were discussing it where it was like,
Honestly, man, I can't do better than a 10 of 10, so I wouldn't change anything.
it was literally pretty much the only thing that I had to pick on.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You got the full story. There,
AvPGalaxy exclusive.
That's right. I wish. I totally would go. I would totally write a short story about the people that got the eggs for the Cold Forge. I would totally write that, except it would have to go through Fox.
Well, if they do another anthology.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
I wasn't keen on the Alien one, but the Predator one was fucking awesome, and apparently the Predator one sold really well. So maybe they'd play with another Aliens one.
Yeah, maybe so. By the way, I think part of the problem with the Alien universe is it's become too suffused with MIL SF.
Okay.
And I think that people keep writing action stories when they should be
too much Colonial Marines.
Too much Colonial Marines. I like the Colonial Marines. They're nice enough guys, but like, let's go. Like.
Well, that was the problem with River of Pain, was that Fox shoehorned, and it came from Fox apparently, was that they needed to have Colonial Marines on Hadley's Hope before Aliens.
Why?
Because apparently that's what Fox wanted. That's what fans love. Apparently.
That's so weird.
And that was pretty much the thing that people had issues with. Why were they there?
Oh my gosh, what would have happened then if Commander what's his name hadn't been there? Commander Cardozo. What if he hadn't been there? They might have been like, you need to put a Colonial Marine in there. I liked giving him the only pulse rifle on the station.
No, I don't know. It's the way people seem to, when the higher ups think they know what the fans want, kind of thing.
I do.
But no, I agree with you. And that's what a lot of people have a problem with the older EU, is that they take Aliens, they dial it up 20, and they completely overdo it.
Yep. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention the only like part of Covenant that I was just like, what the hell is wrong with you? because most of the movie I was pretty okay with. Again, it was kind of the same movie that I'd seen in a lot of ways from other movies, but I was okay with that. What it was when they portrayed the aliens' perspective in the visible light spectrum, because that nailed down something that I wasn't sure about for many, many years. I was always wondering, could you hide from an alien effectively if you were in the shadows? And the answer from Covenant is yes. And I was like, why did you do that? You demystified the entire fucking creature with that one. Like.
Then again, they've got the fisheye in Alien 3.
Oh, yeah. But they don't really see color. It just sees like sepia. And it finds people pretty quick. But yeah.
But then again, you can hide under a table in isolation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Man, I spent more time under tables than I think anywhere else.
I used to like to call it a crouching simulator.
Yes. My nickname for the game was Crouch and Cry.
Crouch and Cry.
We're gonna play some Crouch and Cry tonight. It really is a walking simulator. Now that you put it that way, there's some skill to it.
I remember there's been some stories about people playing it on the Xbox, who had the Kinect hooked up. I'm a PC gamer. I only own an Xbox for Halo, so I never played it on anything other than the PC. But apparently, if you had the Kinect plugged in, it could pick up the audio input.
Yep.
So you had people hiding under a desk, going "fuck off, fuck off, fuck off, fuck off, go away, leave me alone," and it being able to hear.
Oh yeah. That's true on the PlayStation 4 as well. It would listen through the microphone, and you can turn that option off. But my hardcore friends all played with it on, of course.
It's just, I love that game so much.
Oh, it was perfect. It was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. There's nothing better than throwing one of those noisemakers at a group of unsuspecting humans.
Sadistic. Sadistic.
Oh man, that was something else though. The alien in that game had a main character sense. So if I was running past a bunch of people and they were standing still and shooting at me, the alien would still go straight for me, and I was like, man, what the like. What, your mom blew up one of you? Is that what it is? Like,
I had a cool moment in the game when a Joe got a hold of me.
Yeah.
And the alien heard the noise between me and the Joe, comes down, pushes the Joe out the way, and grabs me.
You're just like, what the hell, man?
Please give me a chance. Come on.
Those Joes.
I love them. I thought they were great in as well. Just the change between the eyes.
They are such a Doctor Who robot, aren't they? Like, don't they just kind of seem like they should be walking around, like they should be like pretty normal for most of an episode, and then the Doctor's like, don't do that, don't talk to them, and then they turn evil.
For a Brit, I never really got into Doctor Who.
For an American, neither did I, but they still look like Doctor Who robots to me.
I can't really say I haven't watched that much. Only a couple of seasons.
Oh, only a couple of seasons.
Well, my girlfriend at the time was really into it, so I watched it.
Sure. So my wife loves it too. Like everybody that I know who's like a decent human being likes it. It's just me, So maybe there's some Sudler in you too.
Well, I have a strong dislike for everybody, so
Good job.
Well. I work in IT support.
I see now.
And I run a fandom website, so I get to see a lot of the worst of people.
I would imagine so. Feelings on the IT crowd?
Very accurate.
All right then. Well, that's my interview.
What was it? People. What a bunch of bastards. That's one of my favorite quotes from that.
Oh, of course.
I love IT crowd. I think it's brilliant.
It is. I agree. So, what else you got?
Okay, we're nearly done. Just one more, and it's an obligatory one before we sign off. And that is, I think it'd be pretty fair to say that the book ends with the door left slightly ajar for more from Blue. Is it looking likely you'll return for a sequel or for a completely different Alien novel?
Well, I don't think I don't know about a sequel. Not, I wouldn't do it. If I was going to do a sequel, I wouldn't be interested in telling Blue's story again because you've already discovered so much about her that it won't be shocking anymore. You
Mm,
know, if you come into there knowing who she is, all you can be from there is disappointed in all the things you already knew. However, I would be interested in writing about Siegson. I would be interested in writing about the people that got the eggs. You know, I wouldn't mind doing kind of a parallel canonical story to what else is going on that's essentially self-contained.
okay.
But yeah, of course, that all depends on, you know, how well this book does, how much money they offer, let's be honest. And of course, I'm in the middle of, an epic sci-fi series for Orbit, that's still, I'm still writing it. So there's also that
So your
concern.
plate's still pretty full then.
It definitely is. So, but yeah, I had a blast writing Alien, and a lot more fun than I even expected to have, which I had long fantasized about writing an alien novel. And if you're listening to this and you have been fantasizing about writing an alien novel, the way you do it is you sell a different novel.
Yeah, I remember when DH Press, when Dark Horse had their own little novel line,
Hmm.
they had an open submission policy. And I got a chance to chat with some of their editors. And I said, I asked them about the open submission thing and if they were sort of open to fans going in and pitching. And they said something along the lines of, you go in and you pitch them a really good romance novel or a really good comedy novel. And at the end, you just say, by the way, I really love aliens.
Right, right. That, yeah, that that sounds about right. I oh man, I gotta tell you. Actually, I'm sorry. This story has to go on this podcast. I've failed to mention it in every other interview.
Okay, hit me.
But here is my this was my first attempt at alien fanfic. Uh, I was in middle school. Jurassic Park had just come out, and Alien Resurrection had not yet come out, and I was so bummed that Ripley died at the end of Alien 3. I mean, as an adult now, I'm like, that makes sense. How much more Ripley do we really need? But as a kid, I was like, no, Ripley equals aliens. You can't do one without the other, which
That's
is
still Fox now.
right. That's total crap, but yeah, the series totally, and like, how much more unlucky can she be? Because she kind of derps her way into a bunch of different aliens. Like, she wasn't even trying, you know. Like, there's a big galaxy and she just constantly runs into aliens, but I was like, oh, she's dead, but I can fix that. They could clone her
Like in Jurassic Park.
like in Jurassic Park, but because she had the face hugger in her, maybe the alien queen could come back with her. And I wrote this all in a letter and I sent it to Fox. And because at my local library you could like look up the addresses of movie studios, and so I sent it to Fox, and I just a handwritten letter from a middle schooler. And I am not saying that they stole the plot of Alien Resurrection from me. I'm really not. What I am really saying is that's the kind of plot that a 12-year-old would think was good.
So what are you saying about Joss Whedon's writing right now?
That I think it's really telling that there's only one female android anywhere in the movies, and she's all full of angst about it. That's a real Joss Whedon-y kind of thing to do. He just put Buffy Summers in an android.
Wait, didn't that happen in the show as well?
I don't remember. That's just American Doctor Who,
See, I never liked Buffy. That's what the current girlfriend's really into Buffy.
I I loved Janae long after I saw Resurrection, because I saw Resurrection. That was the first Janae I ever saw, and then I got in.
City of the Lost Children and Amelie and stuff.
Right, exactly, and I got into Janae through anime because I think it was Manga Video had the rights to distribute City of Lost Children.
Right.
And so they would put trailers for it in front of like Ghost in the Shell,
Mm.
and so started watching it, and I didn't know Janae and Whedon wrote and directed Resurrection. That's not, but at the time in my life when I was really getting into this stuff, I would have told you that was like putting, well, I guess this only makes sense to Americans, peanut butter and jelly together. It's of course it's going to work. It's Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Joss Whedon.
That's one of the most interesting things about Resurrection, though, is it's the complete antithesis of Alien. You've got
Yes.
all these talented people. I mean, I know people like to hate on Whedon nowadays, but I love Firefly, I love Serenity, I love Avengers. Jean-Pierre Jeunet, Amelie's awesome. City of the Lost Children's amazing.
Very Long Engagement, Delicatessen. Yep.
Delicatessen, yeah. I never saw Very Long Engagement.
Oh, you should.
And you've got all these talented actors as well. And I know many of them are a staple of Jean-Pierre Jeunet as well, which is awesome. And Fox don't give them hassle. Fox leave them to it and let them do what they want to do.
Right.
And you end up with a mess.
I know. And that was why when I saw Prometheus, I was like, how did I not see this coming? Because, again, it was Ridley Scott and Damon Lindelof. And I was like, oh, that's going to be perfect. It's like putting peanut butter and jelly together. Now, every time I say that phrase, I'm going to be like, oh, right, no, it's not. That's going to suck. and I'll just be pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Whedon fan because all of his characters are a little too perfect. Like, they're kind of flawed in perfect ways. Like, their flaws are all lovable flaws. And I'm like,
I suppose you could say that about the crew of this Serenity, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, that guy might murder you in your sleep. Well, he wouldn't really. He would actually like be your best friend. But you see what I mean? Like, Adam Baldwin's character is a perfect example of a character who is never exploited. There's like they play up how bad he is, but he never really does anything that bad.
There's the episode where he betrays him.
Yeah, kind of.
Mal's getting ready to kick him out the back. I want to watch Firefly now.
Oh well, I really enjoy. I enjoyed Firefly at the time. It didn't quite hold up for me, but that's because that's because I just really like writing dark shit, I guess. But then again, the book that I've got coming out, everybody's like, if you like Firefly, you're gonna like this book, and I'm like, don't do that to me, guys. Come on. But like publicly, I'm like, yeah, Firefly.
For those that do like Firefly, Titan are putting out some new Firefly novels.
That's one I would never work on.
Fair enough.
Well, anyway.
That's pretty much it from me, actually. So, yeah, just, thank you for taking the time to sit with me for 2 hours.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. It was nice to kind of get way in depth. I loved it.
And, before we do disappear, is there anything that I haven't given you the opportunity to say that you'd like to share? Any other anecdotes or anything?
I think I just told you how I wrote Alien Resurrection.
Okay. You certainly did.
Yeah, it was perfect. I did a great job.
Oh, well, brilliant then. That's me all done. So, where can folk find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at Alex R. White. R for Rufus. That's my middle name. It means Redbeard, which I'm like, how did my parents know? And then you can also find my my website at www.alexrwhite.com. And of course, please pick up A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, June 26th. It would really mean a lot to me, and I think you'll have a good time, especially if you like Formula One. If you're a Formula One person.
And Firefly.
And Firefly. Yeah, one of the guy from Sci-Fi Channel. He said he was like, yeah, you need to do a. Or he said, I really love Jack McDevitt's Polaris and A Talent for War because I love stories about a lost battleship, which is like what ostensibly A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe is about. And he's like, so I really got kind of into that because I want to read about that. And then he starts talking about how much he likes racing later, and I'm like, buddy, I'm about to blow your mind. It's like I wrote you a book.
Specially tailored.
That's right. And I was like, yeah, the main character is based on Lewis Hamilton. And he's like, Lewis Hamilton can be such a jerk sometimes. I was like, yeah, the main character is based on Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, I'm pre-ordering that currently.
Perfect. There's
And
an endorsement.
And if you haven't already, remember, go and read Alien the Cold Forge.
Yes, please.
And if you haven't read it, why have you been listening to this podcast?
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
Spoiled it.
Excellent.
So, just a reminder about all our socials as well. You can find the website on Twitter at AvPGalaxy. You can find us on Facebook at Alien vs Predator Galaxy. I think AvPGalaxy will pick it up as well. And if you want to come and see me ramble about more stuff than just AVP, I'm on Twitter at _Corporal Hicks. Oh, and we're also trying to use the YouTube channel a bit more. Yeah, it's hard work. I don't know how they've done it. So we've been posting up some lore videos. I've got one about the Cold Forge actually coming up soon as well.
Oh.
Yeah, about the black goo delivery.
Nice.
Got the news and trying to get up some of the interviews as well. So I'm currently working on actually putting our Daniel Cash interview to pretty pictures.
Nice.
And I'll also try and get this up at some point, this podcast, this interview on the YouTube channel. And there's links on the website, or you can just type Alien vs Predator Galaxy into your YouTube search and you'll see that. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to let us know down below or on the socials or on the websites, what you think of this interview. If you have any questions for Alex, shoot them to him on his socials or in response to this. So this has been Corporal Hicks.
And this is Alex White, last survivor of the Cold Forge, signing off.